the writing was not so much the hurdle, nor was the agent and the getting the book deal. This is the selling of the book.
My name is Bethany Saltman, and I am an author and a best-selling book coach.
And I'm Fran Hauser. I'm an author, a keynote speaker, and a publishing strategist. These How I Did It conversations will inspire listeners to claim their own authority mindset and turn the story they can't stop telling into a book the world needs to read.
This is Bookbound, the podcast, created in partnership with Share Your Genius. Welcome to the show, everyone. I'm so excited to introduce you to our guest, Dr. Aliza Pressman. She's a developmental psychologist, professor, podcast host, and now an author. Her book, The 5 Principles of Parenting, just came out in January 2024. Her author journey had us reflecting and deep diving on what it takes to build a platform alongside your book, because the book world has changed so much with the addition of social media and how we market books these days. She gave us some amazing insight on the rookie mistakes you want to make sure you don't make as you build your own platform. And she also touched on the power of connections and the difference the support from other women makes on our journeys. I hope you love this conversation as much as we did. Let's dive in. Hello, Aliza. So good to see you. Thanks for being here.
Good to see you. Thank you for having me. It's very exciting. Glad you're doing this.
Yes. We're so excited. So let me dive in with the question that we like to ask every guest at the beginning. How did you know that this material was a book? As we know, you've been doing this incredible work, the podcast since 2019. You have an incredible Substack. You've been in this, quote, space for a long time, crushing it, I might add. So what happened to turn this into a book, and why now?
Interestingly, always promised I would not write a book. So I'm not, I really, for 20 years now, have been like, there are too many books about this topic. And mothers in particular are so inundated with content that it can start to make you feel like there must be something you're missing. Otherwise, why would there be so many books? So I really shied away from it. And then a couple of years ago, I just started to wonder, just from people giving me feedback, like, is there a way to put under one roof the stuff that really matters in the science that could maybe help be relieving? And I thought, if I can make a relieving book that covers from 0 to however old your children are, that maybe it would be of service. And so I tried it.
I love it. So was there any specific time, like anything about like this moment that made you more open to it?
I think just the world seems to keep burning a little bit. Like it just keeps feeling like that. And I work with so many parents, and I hear so much from mothers in particular that it just feels so overwhelming, and they feel like they're never getting it right. And the world is such a mess. And the theme that I kept hearing, and I think it is consistent with pandemic and social media and content getting like kind of exploding, that it was hard to figure out just like how to curate things and know. I really think it's unfair to mothers to say, like, you should just kind of be born with this. It's all in your gut. It's unfair to say that there's actually any evidence that the minutia that we receive of information makes any difference in the world to the big stuff that matters. And so as that kept happening, this time period just felt like the time to say, hold on, there is a lot, but there's not that much that really, really matters. And so that's, I think, what happened.
Oh, I love that.
So I'd love to hear about your process then. So you decide that, okay, I'm going to write the book finally, after 20 years. What was the first thing you did? Did you have a literary agent, or did you need to find one?
There was a literary agent who had approached me about a book a couple years earlier. And I had said to her, I'm not writing a book. And then she said, I think it's time. And I said, I think now I might have something that I want to write. So it was not, I think it's different with me because I'm not a writer. I'm a developmental psychologist who's writing to deliver information in a way that maybe is a little easier to receive for some people. I imagine my voice works for some people, and for some people it's probably as cringy as can be, who knows? That part of the process was easier. In fact, which is probably cutting to the very end of this, to
No.
me, having learned this whole process, the writing, especially because I have piles of content and transcripts and work that I've done over the years and articles, and like the writing was not so much the hurdle, nor was the agent and the getting the book deal. This is the selling of the book. It's so out of my lane to go into marketing and sales, and it's so off my personality type to be like, here's some information. By the way, please buy my book. Like it's so awful feeling. So I would
Ooh.
say title and cover and like things that I have no business, in my view, being in charge of. I was like, wait, what? There isn't like a paint by numbers path for this. That was shocking to me. Just
Huh.
because I'm speaking to people who probably were well aware of this, but I was not.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because it sounds like you had so much of the content from your podcast, your Substack, your all the articles that you've written, right? So social media. Did you have help with kind of packaging it all together? Did somebody help you with that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you
I
really were
did.
supported. You felt really supported in the writing
Couldn't have felt more
process, it sounds
supportive. My
like.
editor is like so, and she has younger kids.
Oh.
It always helps.
Aliza, how did you feel about the book proposal process? I'm
Yeah.
assuming that you and your agent worked on a proposal.
Yes, but interestingly, I had the publishers did offer me a deal without a book proposal, and then I wrote the book proposal to sort of see if I know that's not but
No, my reaction is only because I always tell people, yes, even you have to
need a
write
book
a book
proposal.
proposal. Yeah. So let's pause for a moment and tell our listeners. We can talk about platform, we can talk about all the reasons why someone like you, and this does happen every now and then. I do have a couple clients who are really at the top of their game who were able to get a lot of
Like
interest
five,
without a
right.
proposal. So maybe we should just pause because I know our listeners are going to be like, "Oh, well, maybe I don't have to write a proposal."
Right. No, I think it was very unique because I have so much content out in the world
Yes.
and because I had a lot of social media supporting the content and the podcast that I have, I think supported. And it was not like as I ended up doing a proposal because my agent felt like it wasn't the right offer. So I did end up writing a proposal, but of course I was like, "Are you kidding?"
Yeah, I bet. So are you happy you did? Was that the right thing to do?
I would say that it was an opportunity for me to figure out, well, I thought it was an opportunity for me to figure out what I was gonna really be doing. I think the challenge in what I do is that I'm such a generalist. So I'm not like
Got it.
writing about one very small thing, which is odd because in my field, in developmental psychology, like when you get your PhD, it's on like the tiny sliver of this piece of the tiny sliver of a pie, and you become super, super laser focused. But my work life has been much more of a generalist and translating research and then doing small amounts of research that are about one particular thing. And so I think that's a harder sell. It's just hard to sell it. Like I still can't tell you like a great marketing or elevator pitch and my book comes out in a week and I'm like, "Huh, it's not urgent. It doesn't have the
Mm.
urgency."
Mm.
Like it should have urgency. On the one hand, I get it. Like raising our children and ourselves is kind of a big deal. On the other hand, I don't want it to feel urgent because I want everybody to know that like this is meant to be additive and relieving. It's not meant to be, if you don't read this, your kids are going to be
Yes.
terrible. And
Right.
I think that unfortunately in marketing right now, there's a lot of like histrionic
Mm.
ways of
Oh, yeah.
reaching parents. And I'm unwilling to do that, which I think is not great for maybe selling books, but I think it's what feels good for me in writing the book.
What did you do your PhD on?
I did my PhD on sensitive maternal caregiving in the first year, and then outcomes in year 5 in kindergarten,
Got
like
it.
cognitive and social emotional
Wow.
outcomes. And I looked at changes, like if you had a particularly easier time early on, but then it got harder or vice versa, or sort of stayed stable the whole time.
Interesting. Well, one
Yeah.
of the things we talk a lot about is the story you can't stop telling. So would you say, have you been talking about a similar since then all the way into your book, or do you think you've changed radically?
I definitely haven't changed so radically, which I think one of the themes I talk about is like, I don't know how we started to say there's like transformational and revolutionary stuff going on in this field. It's actually been going on for decades and decades and decades, as you
Thank
know.
you. Yes. Thank you.
And I think it's getting delivered in an exciting way now. It is strange because it's like if you really look back at the literature from 25 years ago, you wouldn't be like, oh, we've got a revolution on our hands.
Right.
It all
Right.
says the same thing. So I think if anything, I think that's very relieving. A lot of parents will say, like, I can't keep track. I feel like there's different trends and whatever. And I'm like, they're just
Yeah.
repackaged.
Yeah.
Don't you worry.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's not like a silver bullet that we just came up with this year or in the last 5 years. There's just like marketing.
So I'm so excited to talk to you more about marketing, especially because you're so in the thick of it right now. But before we go there, I'm curious, you had all this interest, right? This like inbound interest. And I'm assuming a lot of that interest is because of your platform.
Yeah.
It's because of your social media. It's because of your podcast. It's because of your Substack. Can you talk a little bit about how did you get started on creating this platform? Because it is so exceptional. The work that you've done, seriously, it's so impressive. And I'm just thinking about our listeners who are so scared about like putting themselves out there and launching a platform, right? Everybody talks about this author platform. How did you get started in building your platform?
I think that I just started this podcast, which I will say, if you want to try something where there's just no repercussions if you fail.
Yeah.
Like who cares? Like it's not that we're not putting forth effort, but it's not a financial burden. There's not like some public ranking that's like you're a failure. There are millions of podcasts. Like you can kind of put yourself out there in the world. And I felt like that was a very safe way to start a platform because it was kind of like, if nobody wants what I'm selling,
It's okay.
it doesn't feel great, but it's not going to be, this will not change my work life. This will not change my relationships. This will just be it's like a very soft way to put yourself out there. Cause it's just like, you don't even realize when you're like, I feel like right now we're just the three of us.
Yeah.
I mean, sure, other people will be listening, but it's not on our minds, or at least it wasn't on mine.
Yeah.
For better or for worse. So I think that is a really easy way to start that feels less vulnerable than writing something.
Yeah, that's true. Or even like social media, where then you're looking at the number of likes and the number of comments and the
That's much more
engagement.
public.
It's much more public, right?
Much more public. So I started social media to let people know about some of the content in the podcast because I know that nobody has time for anything, and maybe all these different ways of reaching people, something will resonate and be helpful. But I didn't start the podcast social media within a thoughtful, like longer game view
Got it.
of what I wanted it to be. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have called it Raising Good Humans podcast because it's so limited to the podcast. It's even confusing because my book is called The 5 Principles of Parenting.
Mhm.
But the part that was beneficial is that I just really was like, these are not my primary, like, this is not how I derive any of my worth or any of my sense that my work is valuable. So I'll just put it out there if it is of service. And if it's not, I genuinely had no skin in the game. And I think that is easier. Like right now I have skin in the game and I'm like selling the book. So it feels much more personal. And I'm kind of, 100%, this is the first time since I started the podcast where I'm like, this would this stings when people do not respond.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes. Well, I love that you talked about being of service because we talk about that all the time. Egos get bruised, as you're saying, right? It stings. If we can stay of service, then it can roll off a little bit more. So I love that the beginning of this whole process for you sounds like was to be of service.
I'm limited in how many families that I can work with, and I work in a hospital where there's like limited amounts. So we just have limited resources. And it just seemed like an easy way to reach people if it could be of service, and a harmless way to not reach people if it was not.
Hey there, sorry to interrupt, but we know you're hungry for more on how to write, publish, and launch your own book. So we'd love to tell you about something special we have starting up in May of 2024.
Yes, Bethany and I are so incredibly excited to host a Bookbound accelerator, literally designed just for our listeners. We know so many of you want to write a nonfiction book, but you aren't sure how. So we created the super practical accelerator to take you step by step through the process. And the coolest part is that we've designed this whether you're interested in going the traditional route, hybrid, or self-publishing.
Yep, we've gotcha. So if you're a woman writer, professional, entrepreneur, or thought leader who's ready to turn the story you can't stop telling into a book the world needs to read, this is the opportunity for you. Over the course of 2 months, we'll help you create a bookbound blueprint, which will include your book's big idea, organizing principle, table of contents, market positioning, and title.
In just 8 weeks, you'll come up with your bookbound blueprint. Plus, you'll get exclusive access to our very own extensive database of publishers who are looking for books just like yours. Yep, the only people who have access to this database are folks in the accelerator.
Go to bookboundpodcast.com/accelerator for all the details. The link will be in the show notes too. We hope you'll join us. Limited spots are available. If you're interested, apply today. And so I wanted to ask you about your platform. Did you have one, what we call muse in mind, or like the ideal customer avatar? Like, did you think about that at any point in the beginning or writing the book? Did you have like one person in mind?
I had my mom groups in mind.
Mm.
I really like some of them I've been with for 14 years, 15 years. And I know them and they know me. And I sort of imagine that the reader was just like one of the archetypes in my mom's group, sort of curious enough to do this and wanting the support enough to do this, but not so much so that they weren't going to get annoyed when I said, certain things are not going to matter. Because I think that bothers some people. That's not for everyone. I can tell in the beginning of my groups, especially when I first started these mothers groups, I think 17 years ago, I noticed that some people came in thinking that I was going to tell them how to do everything right. And I think for some people, when they found out that was not actually feasible, because we don't know the answers to that, we just have bigger picture science that gets translated into much more kind of minutia oriented guidance. I think I was reaching the parents. I kind of wanted the parents that come between wanting to have every single thing be just so, and the parents who were like, I don't believe in parenting books. This is nonsense. I sort of wanted to capture that middle space.
I love that.
Oh, I love that. Aliza, I'd love to go back to the title of the book and get like a little bit behind the scenes on why it's not called Raising Good Humans. And so how did you guys think about raising good humans versus the 5 principles of
Great question.
parenting? And I'm so curious about that.
So sometime after my podcast started, but probably well after the title was chosen, someone else wrote a book called Raising Good Human. And I'm sure now that I know how publishing works, I'm sure they chose the said title around the same time as I did.
Yep.
But by the time it came out, I probably had the podcast for 6 months. I wasn't going to change the name of the podcast. I didn't even know about it. But then it's a wonderful book. So at least it wasn't like some,
Yeah.
but then over time I would get messages. I read your book and I was like, that's not my book.
Oh, wow.
So I really needed to have a distinctive name from
Yeah.
that. And then, I did put Your Essential Guide to Raising Good Humans in my subtitle
Love
because
that.
it's some recollection of what I am more known for.
Yeah.
But then I wanted to call it Raising Good Parents. I thought that would be
Oh.
like more honest about what it was really about, but that got rejected.
That's like one of the I've written 2 books now, and the title is always it's just so hard. Oh my
So
gosh, I remember, like, the lists of, like we'd be brainstorming, and it would be, like, 50 ti and then I remember my publisher, like, going and talking to Barnes& and Noble about it, like, "What do you guys think would be a good title?" Because
yeah,
right? Because Barnes& and a physical bookstore, the cover and the title really matter
right.
when you talk about selling the book. But yeah, it's always so hard. I love that you included the Raising Good Humans phrase though in the subtitle just to tie it all
Just
together.
to tie
That
it
was
all
so
together.
smart. That was so
I
smart.
definitely was like, and I'm pretty sure my publishers did capture those. Like, I think everybody likes a number. And
Yes. Yeah.
there was a part of me that wanted it to be like a deeper title, like attunement or, like the things that we just,
Yeah.
but ultimately I landed with this because, well, first of all, one of my friends suggested it. It was not, I definitely didn't come up with it, but also she's an author and she was like, people like numbers and they like to know what they're getting. And I was like, all right.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, keep it simple,
Promise.
right? Keep it
Put the
simple.
Kept
promise
it
So
really
on the
simple.
title.
yeah.
What?
Yep.
Your book is coming out next week. I mean, by the time this podcast airs, it will be out in the world. But here we are, the 3 of us talking, and it's coming out next week. It's such a great book. As a mom, I loved it. I want to tell you, I know you're probably feeling a lot of pressure around launch and
Yeah.
getting good numbers, but this is going to be a timeless, perennial, evergreen book. It's going to be
Thank
around for a
you.
very, very long time. So, like, as you're, feeling a little bit of agita around the marketing, just keep that in mind because I think as authors, we get ourselves so like worked up about launch, about
Yeah,
that
I
first
agree.
week, right? What are you focusing on right now from a marketing perspective?
I do think that you're absolutely right. Like I keep trying to remind myself, and I actually wrote down on a piece of paper, like my goal for this book was the opposite of trendy. So like if it's timeless and I want it to be able to stand the test of time, I have to let go of the fact that it's going to be a trendy, exciting book, which means it's
Yeah.
not as easy to market that first week, but it's going to
Yeah.
be a long game. So I just have to remind myself that
Yep.
this particular week when there's like so much going on. I have noticed for whatever reason, the best way that this is starting to get marketed has not been through traditional channels. It's been through clients and friends who have read it and are just like putting it out there on social media and have actual meaningful feelings about it. And I noticed there's a really big difference between when people feel like they care about it and they get it, and people who are just kind of
Mm.
quoting you in an article or things like that. Like that doesn't seem from a marketing perspective. And I know zero about this, but I'm just observing because I know nothing about this. What I'm observing is that authentic like connection with the book seems to be the only thing that has moved any pre-order needles. And I also am interested in the fact that I've been told over and over, I'm sure this will come out and we'll find out, but that I have to figure out again, like I said before, the urgency factor, and that's such a huge part of marketing. And so like I'm going to find out whether or not I know mothers more than marketing knows mothers about, like, not all mothers, but like this one space between mothers that I'm really trying to capture, which are the ones that want some resource, but they're like, please don't inundate me and make me feel like crap. But I haven't been comfortable with like creating urgency. And I think that, I'll get back to you in a couple of weeks if that
Yeah.
backfires, or if
Yeah.
it's
I
like,
love that. I mean, from a marketing perspective, that's a great marketing angle, the non-urgent parenting guide, because this is timeless.
you might not rush to get it that day, I think is the problem with the marketing. But
Well, unless you're really craving something that's going to be more comforting and
yes,
informative
yeah,
than something that's going to put out a fire.
exactly. And I really want to capture that feeling. I
Yeah.
really do. So that when the fires come, my hope is everybody's prepared with the
Right.
absolute best
Right.
information they can,
Yeah.
feel like, okay, I can handle this fire because I didn't deal with it in real time. I actually have been sort of fluent in how we respond to these kinds of things.
I love that you brought up the authentic connection and just people in your world who, whether they're clients or their friends, who really care about the book. They love the book. They're posting about the book. It's coming across in a really genuine way. And I always say that to people, like I say to authors, start with your personal network, start with the people that are in your world. There's so much power there. Like, I know we're all thinking like scale, like how do I write? How do I scale? How do I
Right.
sell a ton of books? But if you take it person by person, people in your network, it's so, so powerful. And
Yeah.
we can't forget that.
I think it's true. And I just struggled like until just the last month, I would say, when I'm like, oh, God, okay, I have this book in my hands. I'm going to get it to the people that I think really will respond to it. But I struggled at first because I was like, oh, I don't want to ask anybody anything.
Oh,
And so I had to start to remember, like, there's actually information in here that's helpful. I'm trying to only send it to people for whom it would be helpful or who are very much in relationship with the circle of parents that would find it helpful. That was hard. Like, I really had to have a sit down talk with myself. Like, you're not asking somebody to do something bad for themselves.
Yeah.
Hopefully this is really like of service,
of
and
service.
also they'll just be getting it earlier. But it was really, that was a scarier thing to do. And
Yeah.
then once I started I did it, I like trickled these things as I started to get more comfortable with it. But at first I was like, would you mind if I could just send it to you?
I know. And you know what else too? People get excited about getting the book in advance.
Yeah.
There's
really.
so many people that get excited about that. And they're also
Really
rooting for
cool.
you. They want to be supported, right? We have to get over that hump of like just asking, just like feeling okay to ask.
It's really hard, especially for a particular age group of women. It's like
Yeah.
very counter to how we were raised. I
Yeah.
can't speak for an entire generation of women, but I can say that younger working women are much more comfortable with this.
Mm.
Yes.
And I definitely was raised to be like disarmingly self-deprecating. I have a service that I can, like, I am of service to you is I'm just sort of not built that way.
Mhm.
And even people 10 years younger than I am, or women, are just like, especially when I'm asking them, I can see that it's their pleasure. It's their
Yes.
pleasure.
Yeah.
And they're like, let's go for this. This is awesome.
Yes.
And I'm like, it's been really cool. So like, I love that about, I think younger women in the workforce are more comfortable with that. But I also am just curious and interested that this is this new challenge as a woman I'm turning 50 in a few days. I'm just getting comfortable with this. That's kind of wild.
So you're turning 50 in a few days, and your book birthday is a few days after that.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, there's
Aw.
a lot of milestones.
Wow, a lot of milestones. Do you speak? Is that a part of, because I'm just thinking about all the moms conferences and events like the Mom 2.0 and where this book just has such a natural home.
I do speak, but mostly at schools and some like corporate stuff. But
Okay.
I don't know. I have wondered from the beginning, and I never got an answer on this. I only find out about those conferences if I see somebody, for example, posting them. Like, I'm like, what is
Okay.
that in Dubai? Like, or whatever it is. So I don't really, like, I never really tapped into those to know. And part of that might be I have one knee, 1 foot, 1 leg in academia and at the hospital. So the conferences that I present at are not, they're like very much not this.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, I think you would be, people would love you. I mean, those conference organizers, you would be amazing. Like, I'm just thinking about all, even like the conferences for women. It's conferencesforwomen.org. That might be an interesting project for someone on your team, or, maybe somebody at the publisher, to just do like a little bit of research on moms and women's conferences and pitch to those conferences, because they might also do bulk buys.
You know, that's great. And thank you. And I just wrote that down. What a great little consult we just had.
Right.
I think also, I think it's worth saying that publishing houses are so stretched thin
Yes.
that there isn't a whole lot of really hand-holding and brainstorming.
Yeah.
And
It's
like, I
true.
even had to have an outside editor because I was like, I
Oh,
don't feel, can you please look
okay.
at this? Because like, I just want to make sure I'm crossing my T's and dotting my I's. And even with copy editing, I was like finding things and I was just like, this is nothing about wrong with my publishers so much as like, I don't think publishing gets that many resources to like spread out.
Yeah.
And so like just your suggestion, one
Yeah.
would think would have come up, but like, why would they know? They don't even know the mother space necessarily or
Right.
whatever
Right.
it is.
Right.
So it's
Right.
very interesting. But in general, like when you get proposals from publishing houses, which I do so often, or PR teams, I don't read past the heading in the subject line. This is just like
Oh,
a little tidbit to know.
yes. People, please listen up. Yes.
Um, the subject line really matters because I don't have bandwidth. And I do have somebody else who goes through all of them first before like I would look at them just for self-preservation and time. But what I think is interesting, and I did say this to my publishers, that subject line is so, I don't know if other people treat it this way, but I think if
Everybody
you are
does.
looking at something and the subject line is not compelling,
Mm.
I just don't have, and contains like a couple of data points that are going to matter to my, like me. So if the majority of guests that I have are experts in the field who are researching blah, 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 like in the subject line, your expertise matters to me.
Yep.
Just
Yep.
to save me the trouble of like trying to figure out if it's, because a lot of stuff that comes my way looks fabulous, but has nothing to do with my podcast. So then you get letters, and sometimes if I open them, I see that it's like a cut and paste.
Yep.
Sometimes they forget the name is still
Yep.
from a different,
Mm.
and that, knowing that has been very, like, it's hard because I'm like, it's hard not to be controlling and say like, if I could just check everything that you're sending out, but I don't, obviously. That's something that probably doesn't benefit me because again, I'm trying not to be trendy and I'm trying to have this be a longevity and timeless. So it's not urgent. So it might not look great in a subject line. But I know that when I'm looking at proposals, I definitely am looking in the subject line.
So
I know.
if you're an author who is working on marketing your book, think about whether you're emailing media, whether you're emailing potential
Change it.
collaborators, influencers, even people in your network, just asking them to write an Amazon review for you. Like, really think about the subject line.
Yes, absolutely.
It's so
It's
important.
so important. And I didn't have the bandwidth to do this, but I wish I had had the bandwidth. Like if I were doing this as my full-time job and I didn't do anything else, I would say I would handwrite. I would personally write each one of the pitches at a minimum, each one of the genre of pitches.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
name the subject line. And I would be much more, like, oh, even by podcast, like don't pitch a podcast of this topic if you've heard that podcasters say they hate parenting books.
Right. It's
Maybe
like,
talk to them
do some
about,
research. Do
yeah.
some research.
And I know that that doesn't happen because I receive these from
Mm.
really big publishing houses down to really smaller ones. And the primary thing is like, I know they don't have time and bandwidth to do the research on the individual. Anyway,
Yes.
it wasn't something I took the time with, but I know if I had, it would be so much better.
This is so good. And because a lot of people that we work with aren't necessarily to the point where they're pitching a book, but they are building their platform. So they're
Yeah.
pitching editors for articles, essays. They're in the building phase. And
Yeah.
we talk to them all the time about subject lines for sure. Get your hook in the subject line and do your research. Who are you writing?
your
Let them
research.
know that you know who they are. Nobody wants to be spammed, even if have something really interesting.
Totally. And I actually had the most humiliating, like,
Woo!
I was like, okay, you know how there's Sam Harris and
Yes.
Dan Harris?
Yes. Oh my God.
I'm so embarrassed. I can't even like so embarrassed about this. It's by far the most embarrassing thing that happened during this process. But sometime before Christmas break, I was like, I have to reach out to Dan Harris because I have so much mindfulness in my book, right? Like every chapter ends with a regulation exercise. I asked my agent for his email, which she gave me because I guess they know each other. I then listened to a Sam Harris podcast sometime that week, which was also great.
And also about mindfulness.
And also about mindfulness,
Wow.
about resilience, in fact. So I'm like, dear Sam, personalizing. I was like, I love the work that you have been doing lately, particularly about resilience, but also just in this crazy world and the mindful blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I sent it and then I didn't hear back. And I'm like, hey, to my agent, do you want to chime in? Because I thought I copied her. And she's like, I said, do you want to chime in for the email I sent to Sam Harris? And she's like, why would you send an email to Sam Harris? And so I'm like, no. So I go and I see that I wrote Dan Harris this long thing to Sam Harris. And then I sent him another email that was just like, just realized that I made a mistake.
Brilliant.
But you're also awesome. And I'm going to crawl into a hole now. So humiliating.
Did he write you back? Did he write you back?
He did. He just said no problem.
Oh.
Oh my God.
Man.
It wasn't like no problem, but you sound totally stable and I'm so excited to read your book.
Well, I've done things like that and I always, try to call it and say, do what you did. And I have found that really
It works.
It can work because I'm sure Dan Harris and Sam Harris, they're so different and they probably get this all
So
the
different.
time. Oh my God. I love that.
Oh my God. That's the
sharing
best
that.
story.
Yeah. I haven't told anybody. I'm feeling better.
Oh, a little talk therapy.
Yeah. Anyway, so I guess the lesson there is just like, look at what you're doing.
Right. Double check. God.
Double check. Oh my gosh.
We've
so
all been
great.
there.
Oh my God. We've all been there. And this is such a pleasure. I cannot thank you enough. And I want to be respectful of your time. I know you might have to go get on a plane to come to New York.
Yeah, Aliza, we loved having you.
Yeah.
Tell everyone where they can follow you online and connect with you, all that good stuff.
I'm on Instagram on @RaisingGoodHumans podcast. I am at any bookseller. You can get the 5 Principles of Parenting, preferably at bookshop.com if you're doing it online, so you can get to local bookshops.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a Substack, dralizapressman.substack.com.
Yes, a very popular one.
And I think that's it.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We're so excited and congrats on the book.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on Bookbound.
If you like what you heard, please subscribe and rate and review us on your favorite podcast listening platform.
please visit us at bookboundpodcast.com for more on us and how we work with authors.